Hello and a warm welcome to Talking Stocks. I am Gugulethu Cele. In studio with me is Peter Armitage and Bryan, both from Anchor Capital. Now today we're talking Astoria, a global investment company which is inward listing on the JSE this month. The company invests in global high-quality equities, niche funds and private equity. So lots of excitement with regard to this particular venture. But before we get into the details, is there a particular relationship between Anchor Capital and Astoria?
Yeah, right up front, we must just make it clear that we have an interest in this venture, not the company itself. So Anchor is not a shareholder of Astoria. I'm a non-executive director along with 5 other directors. But what's exciting for us is Anchor has been appointed as the asset manager to Astoria. So Astoria's inward listing on the South African market should hopefully raise 2 billion rand plus, and it's then up to Anchor Capital to go and employ that globally and make returns out of it. So part of why we're excited about it is we obviously back our own ability to go and create that value. So in all this communication, it must be clear that we do have an interest. Yeah.
So no one can come back and point fingers at us. It's out there and it's clear. But tell us about the beauty of this particular stock that will be listing on the local exchange. I understand international exposure.
Yeah, so in the property space, there's a company called Rockcastle, which has done phenomenally well. So you can buy one share, and that share gives you exposure to a broad global property portfolio. And we found increasingly in our local portfolios with our investors, and why we think it's attractive for our investors is it's quite hard to get balanced global exposure. So when the rand's weakening and you want to diversify your portfolio, you can buy a handful of big companies. A lot of those big companies are what we call dirty rand hedges. So they in turn are in emerging markets. So they're not giving you rand versus dollar, they're giving you rand versus Asian currencies, which have also been falling. So we think it's quite sexy to be able to buy one share, which gives you exposure to a globally diversified basket of equity investments, and that's in 3 categories: in equities, niche funds, and in private equity funds.
So listed and unlisted as well.
Yeah, I think we just had to come up together with Astoria and Anchor Capital. We had to come up with what we thought was the best way to get great compound returns on an investment. So a nice diversified mix we think works very well.
Are there any particular sectors of interest though?
We're looking at this from a global perspective. So the ideal is quality, well-known businesses, where most people know the underlying stocks that are sitting within these businesses, but can't necessarily access them directly. We will have a bottom-up approach in essence, but there will be a macro theme to it. So should we see any attractive sectors, opportunities, one, we can do it through the direct investments. And then as Peter rightly points out, we have this niche category as well, where if we see a great opportunity coming out of a region where we may not have on-the-ground experience, we have the ability to utilize that section of the portfolio to take advantage of it. And it really gives the portfolio a bit of a differentiator to some of your stock standard trackers or global indices and things like that.
And then I think another differentiator is the ability to gear.
Yes.
So once you've got money offshore, you can borrow money at 1 or 2%. So if you can find some investments that give a return of 10%, or gear against property, a certain cash flow stream, that we can enhance returns quite materially, but done in a very cautious and certainly we won't gear initially. It would have to be in for assets where we're very comfortable with the underlying.
Exactly. I see the scale is also something that's been highlighted in the slide, which was on screen a moment ago. But walk us through some of the offer details. How much are you hoping to cultivate from the investment?
We've got permission from the Reserve Bank to take $450 million offshore. So that's 6.5 billion rand. So that's the ultimate size. We wouldn't imagine it would get near there. We're targeting $150 million in the capital raise, so that's just over 2 billion rand. Before the roadshow and the marketing started, there was $50 million already committed. So it's going ahead regardless. But we've been participating in a roadshow and the reception's been phenomenal. So we're pretty confident there's going to be some quite strong demand. And then it's a question of where the share trades thereafter.
Exactly. But what about the issue price? I think a lot of investors get worried when you hear offshore exposure,
well,
the currency crosses.
It's basically $1. That's the net asset value converted at the rand exchange rate at the time.
Okay.
So current exchange rate, you're looking at 13.80 to 14 rand as your $1. We're in the process at the moment of the roadshow, the marketing, raising awareness on it. The offer itself will open on the 16th of November and then close midday on the 18th. When after that there'll be a week, and then Astoria will list on the JSE around about the 25th.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for people who want to apply for shares, they can apply through their broker. Yes. So all the brokers will be putting in applications to Astoria for shares.
So retail investors can't necessarily pick this up independently, like you say. They need to go through.
Well, they need to apply for R1 million of stock, but you have to do it through a broker.
Yeah.
What about the investment policy? Is this the long-term outlook that we're looking at here? As you mentioned, several sectors that you're also going to look at, like private equity.
Yeah. So the beauty of this is that it's permanent capital. So it's long-term investment. Yeah. The money can never be taken away. You can sell your share, but somebody else has to buy it. Now that's quite advantageous from a from a fund management perspective, because you can make genuine long-term investments. And one of the genuine long-term investments we're going to make, and we've lined up some of the funds already, is in the private equity space. Now in private equity, and we're talking about the big global American-dominated private equity companies. And these companies have typically got fantastic track records over the course of the last 20 years. And it's because they can borrow money at 1 or 2% and invest in things that they've researched well. So one of the companies is a company called Apollo. They're doing a natural resources fund, which they're opening up in December. They've got 80, and it'll be focused on North American and Canadian energy. They've achieved a 25% compound return in their business in dollars since 1972. Their worst fund has done 9%, and that was investing at the top of the energy market. So if you want to buy into that, the minimum you can buy is like $5 million.
Sure.
So the man in the street normally cannot get exposure to these things. So we've set up a structure where we can combine the money into one company effectively, and then about 20% of it to start off with will be invested in that kind of private equity category, which we're very excited about.
For the investor who might be scratching their heads as to how you get to understand these companies, find them in the research, what kind of a feeling or feet on the ground do you actually have to help you reveal these little gems?
So Anchor's responsible for the investment, but Anchor doesn't have expertise in everything and everywhere. So we've got a very competent team with a great track record in terms of good quality global companies, as you've seen in, we discuss them in these shows every week. We've got a team of 20 analysts, 8 of them fully dedicated to offshore. Then we've got some guys sitting in London. We also bought a 50% stake in a business called Capricorn, which is the best performing global emerging markets fund manager in the hedge fund space in the last 5 years. And they've got guys traveling around the world the whole time looking for opportunities. And then we've also done a strategic alliance with a company called ACPR, which is a mid-sized London-based asset manager, and they specialize in funds and private equity funds and are giving us access to those. So where we want big global businesses, we pick them ourselves, and we know those very well. If we wanted to invest in Japan or Indian small caps, we'll choose other fund managers who have expertise in that, so specialists. And then the third category is the private equity space, where and in all the funds, ACPR is helping us do the due diligences, pick the great managers, because that's what they do offshore. They've got about 50 billion rand of assets, which they put into funds around the world. And then the CEO, Daryl Kaplan, is based in Australia, so he's accessing stuff into that time zone. So we've got a nice global network of investment expertise, feet on the ground, and so there's probably 40 people overall looking for opportunities for Astoria to go to the next level. And really the obsession is just to get a great compound increase in net asset value per share. That's the objective of it.
Exactly. Lots of feelers on the ground, quite evidently. But this also might lead to the question of costs and fees. What's the growing rate that we're looking at here?
If we go and look at it from a top-down, we're expecting a total expense ratio in the region of about 1.6%, which is actually extremely attractive in comparison to some of the feeder funds locally or any of the global funds. We've got the scale that we mentioned earlier. So when it comes to brokerage, you can negotiate your brokerage down to a couple of basis points. So you really are getting the best value for money. And then there's a 1% management fee that sits within the company there. So it's actually a very attractively priced offering. And that will all go through from a company perspective. So the company will pay the management fee, etc. So you won't see, as a unit trust, a fee line coming out, etc. This will be a share. It'll trade as it normally does. But as I say, fairly well attractive at the price at this stage.
Time now to get the view from our experts on Astoria, buy, hold or sell. Bryan?
I'm definitely going to go with a buy. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for investors to get in on. The world in one share, with a great team backing it up. Definitely a buy in my opinion.
Peter, you have to agree, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were part of putting the whole thinking together. So we've created something that we want to invest in. So my own money is going in. We're going to ask our clients if they want to put their money in. 10% of any local share portfolio should be in this. It just gives you a nice global portfolio. So we're very excited about it. We think it can do nicely.
For some of the naysayers who just might say that they want direct access to particular shares that they find as firm favorites?
This is not better than taking your money physically offshore. So we still suggest people to diversify should do that. This is something quite specific. We think for South African share portfolios, you should still have a global portion of it. You should also have money offshore. But in an SA share portfolio, particularly smaller ones, I mean, my kids' share portfolios, I'm not going to take their money overseas. I'll put 50% in this and 50% in 10 other South African shares. You know, that would be my personal thinking.
Exactly. But speak to your broker, get more details, and I take it information should also be available on the Anchor Capital website too.
Very much so. Anybody who's listening and paying attention to it, they can refer to the Astoria website where you'll see a whole lot of documentation. And then should they need any further questions, they're welcome to contact us.
Indeed. Well, we look forward to it. I'm sure there will be significant uptake to this and lots of excitement. Well, that's where we'll leave it for this week. Clearly, lots of excitement when it comes to Astoria, a new investment opportunity available for all those who are keen on getting additional exposure through one share to the globe. But a big thank you to both my guests today, Peter Armitage and Bryan Rudd, both from Anchor Capital. And be sure to double check the website for further details. But join us again next time where we talk more stocks.